Hi everyone, I'm Kevin Nelson. Here's a look at what's going on this week in the news. We begin with news from the Vatican. A recent conference in Rome discussed the unprecedented gathering at the Vatican February 21st through the 24th on the sex abuse crisis in the church. Conference leaders discussed, among other things, the best ways to help victims of abuse. Rome Reports has more from the conference.
As the Summit on Abuse is scheduled to begin February 21st, the Pope has asked bishops around the world to meet with victims of abuse. He's led by example, demonstrating that listening is the way to experience their pain and begin the path of healing for both parties. Father Hans Zollner, a summit organizer from the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors, and a UN representative confirm the best ways to help victims going forward.
Now, listening to survivors or victims of abuse is of utmost importance. Once you listen in a way that you stay with the pain, the rage, the anger, the tears, and the hope of people who have suffered that, you cannot remain the same.
The first thing is to talk about it, is to use the homilies to convey the message of what is unacceptable and the message about what people can do about it. Bringing the message to the families, the communities, helping them to understand that any form of violence is not accepted, that they can report cases, they can seek help, they can bring their traumatic experiences into the knowledge and the action of institutions that are established to support them.
Some people are surprised when victims tell their story many years after the abuse has taken place. But it's normal because sexual violence often begins at a very young age when current survivors were most vulnerable. According to Father Zollner, victims of sexual abuse need about 20 to 30 years after they have experienced abuse to start talking.
But we need also to realize that some of them will never speak about this because they don't find the right moment and the right person to open up. And even if they have tried to do so with their parents or whoever they found trustworthy, many times victims report that they were not believed and then they really shut down, they repressed, they tried to forget.
The worst thing, I believe, that the worst message that we can give to victims is that they do not matter, they are not important enough.
Thus, as Catholic bishops are convening at the Vatican this week, both representatives state that everyone needs to understand that any form of violence is not accepted, to report if they see any, and to listen to victims, both within the church and society.
In news from around the country, reactions still coming in after the Vatican announced that former U.S. Cardinal Theodore McCarrick has been stripped of his clerical status. In announcing its decision, the Vatican said that McCarrick was found guilty of solicitation in the sacrament of confession and sins against the Sixth Commandment with minors and adults with the aggravating factor of abuse of power. In a statement following the announcement, Cardinal Joseph Tobin of Newark said that it is profoundly disheartening and disturbing to know that a church leader who served and led the Archdiocese of Newark for 14 years acted in a way that is contrary to the Christian way of life as well as his vocation as a priest of Jesus Christ. James Gren, one of those who have publicly said he was abused by the former cardinal, released a statement saying he was happy that the Pope believed him. He said it is with profound sadness that he had to participate in the canonical trial of his abuser. Nothing, he said, can give him back his childhood, and he has not taken any pleasure in testifying or discussing what happened to him. Boston Cardinal Sean O'Malley called the Pope's action important in administrating justice for McCarrick's crimes and sins, but it cannot in and of itself provide healing for those so terribly harmed by the former Archbishop. O'Malley said the Church's leadership must enforce accountability for cardinals and bishops if they hope to have the opportunity to engage the laity in the work of tangible change in the Church. In news from around the world, a new center near Jerusalem is welcoming pilgrims from around the world and is helping them deepen their knowledge of the Holy Land through different multimedia resources in order to enrich their Holy Land experience.
One can experience a history of Christian salvation in 3D only a few miles away from Jerusalem. This has been made possible through Saxon Visitor Center, which receives pilgrims daily from across the globe. The objective of this center is to make Jesus more accessible from the Old and New Testaments. It is also to provide historical, cultural, and geographical perspective. Many state authorities and religious leaders were present for the official inauguration of the center, including Israel's Minister of Tourism.
I think that this center, the Saxon Visitor Center, will contribute a lot to the experience of the pilgrims that are coming here to Israel, will enable them to know more and understand more the experience they have here.
The center offers interactive screens, four-wall projections, maps, and timelines to help people gain more insight into Jesus' life.
The Visitor Center is a multimedia space, so pilgrims can learn more about these sacred spaces through a historical and geographical perspective. It's a way for them to relive the story of salvation, whether it be at the beginning or the end of their pilgrimage.
This place also organizes conferences and courses on the history of Israel and Christianity here in these ancient lands. The centers helped us present this historical moment. The pilgrims arriving here nowadays are able to experience the mystery that took place between God and people during those times. Saxon Visitor Center has been built and promoted by members and cooperators of Opus Dei from across the world.
Finally, in the news, in a recent statement by Archbishop Waldemar Sommertag, the Vatican Nuncio in Nicaragua, it was announced that Pope Francis has lifted the canonical penalties imposed 34 years ago on 94-year-old Father Ernesto Cardenal. St. John Paul II had suspended Father Cardinal and several other priests from active ministry in 1985 for joining the Marxist-influenced Sandinista government. Father Cardinal resigned from the Sandinista front in 1994. One of the more notable images captured during the Sandinista years was when Pope John Paul visited Nicaragua in 1983. Father Cardinal greeted him by dropping to one knee and attempting to kiss his ring, but the Pope pulled his hand back and shook his finger at the priest. The Code of Canon Law prohibits priests from holding partisan political offices. Well, that is all the information we have for you at this time. I'm Kevin Nelson. Don't forget, you can keep up to date on Catholic news throughout the week with Catholic Newsbreak right here on the Catholic TV Network.